morning and welcome to the Morning Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ham, coming to you as always from the Spotlight Studios here in Morristown, New Jersey. My guest today is the host of the top-rated entrepreneurship podcast, Creating a Brand, and the founder of Podmatch.com, a free service that matches podcast guests and hosts together for interviews. He is Alex Sanfilippo. Alex, welcome to the show.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with you, man. I love your branding. I love the focus, love the name of the podcast. You just do some great work here, man. So I'm really excited to be here with you.
I appreciate that. The focus sometimes can be a little bit all over the place, but I think that's part of the focus. I mean, as you could see, I'm a little bit all over the place. So that works. It works. So, but you got you got the tailored looking shirt. You got that nice clean background. You got the cool mic. So you're obviously a pro at this, right? So how long have you been in the podcasting world?
Yeah, I've been in it for about closer to 5 years. I was about to say 4 years, but I think it's closer to 5 at this point that I've been in podcasting and just started off I'm holding up my phone right now. I was using my phone to record when I first got started. Like I had no idea what I was doing. And yeah, so I started from there and just have kind of worked my way through and started speaking at the conferences and producing a better show and have really just enjoyed the journey along the way. Podcasting is something I'm just so passionate about.
So was it always creating it? Was that your first show or did you do a different show at the outset?
So I've had 3, 2 of them are still going. So the first one, I think I called it something like Digital Coaching Sessions with Alex Sanfilippo. Lasted about 12 episodes and it was bad. I actually found out how to delete that from the internet archive. That is gone. You can't find it anymore, Mike. Wow. So don't go looking for my bad content. And then I actually started. I'm going to go looking. I mean, I probably won't find it, but if I do find it, I'll let you know after I send it to everybody that I know. Exactly. You owe it to me and to yourself to send it out to everybody before you tell me you found it. So the second podcast I started, which is still going, it's just a monthly show. It's about 15-minute episode, just me talking. It's actually for a faith-based Christian blog. So I just talk about Jesus for about 15 minutes a month on this podcast, and I release that the first Monday of every month. And that's just been something really low-key. I've done it with that blog for, I guess, over 4 years at this point now. I've been doing that. And then my main show, the one that's like the business side, and what I really do every week, now twice a week we're releasing episodes, is Creating a Brand. And I started that 2 years ago.
Gotcha. All right. So what were you doing? Do you have like a 9-to-5 job? I mean, I know you're big in the entrepreneurship thing too, which we'll get into as well, but was the entrepreneurship side of it the reason why you started with the podcast, or was there like I would assume that the podcast that you talk about Jesus once a month is not necessarily specifically focused to your business.
Right.
I could be wrong. I'm just guessing. But the other ones, are they connected to things that you're doing beyond podcasting?
So yeah, first off, podcasting doesn't bring in a lot of money. Let's just call it what it is, right? Yeah. Podcasting, like what you're doing being on your side of the mic, is so much more difficult than what I'm doing here. Like it's a labor of love, man. Like there's no way to say that. So I actually came out of a 15-year career in aerospace. So for a long time, I was actually working a corporate job, which was a 9-to-5 job. And I didn't even leave that till after I started Creating a Brand. So, but that was like my big focus for a long time. I knew I wanted to get into something more in the entrepreneurship realm. And yeah, so I started Creating a Brand, and a year later is when I actually exited, when I started working on Podmatch, the company that kind of goes along with the actual podcast itself.
Aerospace. So you're like an astronaut?
Man, I should have given you the disclaimer that I give all the time. I wasn't an astronaut, wasn't a fighter pilot, wasn't a skydiver. I worked behind a computer, and yeah, basically I ran what was called exactly. People are like, "Ooh, he was an astronaut." I'm like, someone once asked me like, "Have you been in the moon?" I'm like, what? I've never left from behind my computer. So I ran a commercial operations division, which is a fancy way of saying I controlled the company's profit margins and processes. So I ran 5 departments that just made sure everything was running efficiently for a really big organization.
Gotcha. Was that the only job that you had prior to this entrepreneurship journy that you've taken on?
That was my only real job.
Real job.
Yeah. When I was younger, I had some other things, but I consider that to be a career.
Yeah, well, 15 years. I mean, that's a long time. I mean, I'm 4 years into my actual job, and I would consider that a career to a certain degree. So I've had a lot of entrepreneurs on the show, and my demographics of this show are people between the ages of 25 and 35. So some of them are entrepreneurs, some of them are interested in real estate because we do a lot of real estate on the show because that's the world that I'm in. Others are they're people that are in corporate jobs are looking to get out and maybe do something else. So at what point in this career did you say, hey, this 9-to-5 corporate, showing up, clocking in, clocking out type thing is not really for me. I need to go do something on my own. At what point, what was the impetus behind that?
Yeah, so it's actually a really fascinating story, Mike. It actually happened at year 10 of 15. So everyone can do the math there. I stayed 5 years longer than I probably wanted to. Disclaimer about the job, though, I actually really enjoyed it. The day I finally left, it was bittersweet. Like, I really ended up loving it. I learned a lot from it. It never was it something like, I hate this job, I want to get out of here. It was just one of those things I knew wasn't going to be forever. And year 10 is when that happened. And there was actually a very specific experience that made me realize that. So at that point, I was in a position that I didn't really enjoy as much. So it was kind of tough for me anyway. But it was the same time that we actually, I say we, being part of the management team, we sold the organization, and it got bought out by a huge multi-billion-dollar organization that added a lot of structure, a lot of money to it, which is great for the company. It actually ended up helping me really enjoy it more. But there was an experience around that year 10 when I was in that job, and it just got sold, where I could no longer feel like an entrepreneur, even though I had a 9-to-5 job. Because I firmly believe you can be an entrepreneur and be in a 9-to-5 job, no problem, Mike. I'm sure that, I can just tell by getting to know you just a little bit, you're that type of guy for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, so I work a corporate job, but I'm in sales, and I do that's literally almost the definition of an entrepreneur. I don't get tips on how to do my job. This I do as part of my job. It's a supplement to what I do to kind of grow that network, grow some different contacts, get out in front of some different people. And I started during the pandemic last year. But that's just one of the things. Like, you need to be creative, think outside the box, figure out how you're going to get your message out. Because, like, ultimately, while I do work for a corporate job, I am in sales. So my livelihood is based on bringing in business. And it's not, I don't get a salary, or I do get a salary, but it's, a small base salary. And then I kind of go from there. So, but yeah, so I appreciate that, you looking at me and thinking that I'm an entrepreneur, but you're right. Good. Very astute of you.
Thank you, sir. So back with that, like, here's the experience that happened. So I still felt that way. And I did something within my organization. There was 5 departments I was overseeing, and we saved a lot of money. Again, profit margins were something that I helped control for the company. And we did this like tweak, this little incentive that really like just bumped up our profit margin in a certain division of the company. And I was psyched about it. I was like, this is like a huge, huge win. I went straight to the CEO, who I was directly reporting to, sat down, like, look what we did over the last quarter. Like, check this out. This is unbelievable. And he's like, yeah, I saw it. And he didn't say anything at first. I'm like, okay, like, well, that's pretty good. Like, I wanted to kind of get some sort of feedback from the guy. And he said, he's like, the shareholders are furious. I was like, huh? I'm like, this is money we saved. We made more money. It's in our pocket. And apparently, in a publicly trading company, if you don't tell the shareholders you're going to do that, they can't sell stocks for as much as they potentially could have. So they were mad because we did more than we said we were going to do, when our job was to estimate and be accurate to that estimate. So they go out and sell more stocks next time around. And that was the first time that I realized, like, my creative freedom to be an entrepreneur in this business isn't here anymore.
Yeah.
And now, like, it was simple things started changing, where it was like, at one point in time, I could on a Monday have an idea, and on Friday, all of my departments could be trying it. If it didn't work, we'd revert back and we'd try something else. And now it was, okay, here's your idea. Let's submit it to the board. Let's submit it to the shareholders. Let's talk about it for a while. Let's have a few more meetings about it. Let's meet with our parent company. Like, all these things. It was like 6 months to implement something that used to just be, we could immediately hit the ground running.
Yeah.
And again, bittersweet the day I left the organization. But at that time, I was like, I think that I need to leave this, because this is not going to be for me long term. And that's kind of when I started. And yes, that was 5 years, was a long time before I actually left. And I'd say the first 3 years, I just kept on running into, for me, bad idea, poor execution, couldn't find anything else that could work for me. So I was kind of stuck there for a little bit, or at least felt that way.
So you were trying other things in that initial 3 year span, and then eventually, I guess, figured something out, right? So it was nice to have like that fallback of being in that corporate job while you're trying to figure things out. Did you ever think that maybe because you were in that corporate job and you were trying those things that ultimately did not work, that maybe you couldn't put the time and effort that they needed? Or was it just something more so that you were like, well, I just, it just wasn't a good idea?
Yeah, Mike, there's a lot of things right there. I think first off, it did give me a wrong mindset of what I'm doing doesn't have to work.
Right.
So it was a side hustle, right? Everything else was like a side hustle at that point, but it didn't have to work because the corporate job was there. I was doing very good. I mean, even my last year, the final year of that I was at that company was actually my best performing year that I ever had, and my departments. Like it was insane. So like I was not being pushed out. I wasn't doing a bad job. I didn't hate it. So the first problem I'd say I have was, I don't really need this to work. And if you don't have that mentality as an entrepreneur, it's really hard to make anything really work for you because you don't feel like you need it. And that was probably my first and biggest mistake I made during those first 3 years.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things. Like when I started this job, selling title insurance. So I was a college baseball coach prior to this job, and now I sell title insurance. So as you can imagine, that's like comparing apples to hippos. Like it's like literally not even in the same ballpark.
Right.
But I had to do it. And when I started it, it was like a new thing for me. It was trying to figure it out, like figure out what I was going to do, how I was going to operate. And I like kept trying to figure out ways that I can do maybe like baseball lessons on the side or do this on the side, because I didn't want to really dive into this job 100% because it was new. I didn't have any meetings. I didn't have any clients, which meant I had no deals, which meant I had no money. So I was like, well, this job sucks. Like I had really no help. And so it was just trying to, once there was at some point, I forget exactly when it was, but I realized that I needed to try to jump into it 100%. One of my favorite quotes, and I'll hit you with it. It's a Gandhi quote as told by Mike Hamm. It's, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. So if you're going to do something, you got to be the biggest, most badass version of that thing that you could possibly can be. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, right? Is that like, because they're doing like they're power washing my building right now. So I don't know if you could hear that or not in the background, but a little bit. Great. Very professional. Yeah. So if you're going to do something, you got to go all in. And that's what I did. And eventually, kind of progressing through life and getting myself to here, that's kind of what happened. And now I feel like I'm fully invested in this job, doing a lot of different things like this podcast to help grow my business.
Man, that's such a good point. Actually, it makes me think of another episode that you actually did on your podcast. I think it was called Tearing Out the Tags. It was with B. Evans.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, for anyone listening, if you have not heard that episode, go back and find the one with B. Evans in it. Really great. I think one of the things that held me back was if I looked at my person, and this is kind of from that episode a little bit, so I don't mean to like double share here, but if I go back and look at my personality, every piece of it, like on paper, if I go like and do all those personality tests, I'm a great corporate employee. And I think that having that mindset really also held me back. So not only did I feel like I didn't need to leave, but also part of me was like, maybe I shouldn't leave. Maybe this is just what I'm made for. And I could have used B's episode with you about 5 years ago, man. So thanks a lot for being so late.
Yeah, but no problem.
But no, it was really that point is so important. It wasn't until I removed those labels for myself of what I could and couldn't do that I was actually able to make a transition. Mentally was really the first place that I needed to move.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you listening to the show too, but I definitely think that's a great point because so B is my co-host for a daily podcasting room that I do on Clubhouse. So that's how I knew her. And then I was like, well, why don't you come on the show? Just because we talk all the time. So why not let's dive into the story a little bit more. So I'm glad that you listened because, thank you. And I'm glad that it helped because that means that the stories and stuff that I'm trying to get across to people are resonating. So what was the first thing that really after those first 3 years of dabbling in some different things, what was like maybe the first thing entrepreneurship wise that actually clicked and you were like, oh, I might have figured this out?
Yeah. So I hated a lot of things along the way as well. I should mention, like I started doing some web design and it took one bad client for me to realize this is the worst job ever. And some people are great at that and more power to you, keep up with it. I'm like, this is terrible. Cause that person was like, she was like, could you move that over like 1 pixel? I'm like, what? Like, you already paid me. I thought we were done. Anyway, so there was things that like could have succeeded in that I just really didn't like. And it wasn't until I decided to start the Creating a Brand podcast. And I started that because I wanted coaching as an early entrepreneur who wanted to leave my job. And I wanted to speak to those people. So I brought in professionals, free coaching for me, and also to be able to help encourage and impact other people. And man, that was like, that instantly clicked. Like as soon as I launched that podcast, like people started listening, I started learning. It gave me a new mindset that I needed to have. And I realized that podcasting was going to be the space that I could do something in because I also immediately felt the passion in that space that I had never felt anywhere before. And that was just a real moment of clarity for me. And so that happened in July 2019. And from that day forward, like I knew, okay, this is when I'm going to be on that journey. And that was during the last 2 years of being in aerospace.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so I think that's very interesting because you talk about how, you just start this podcast because you want to learn from other people. And that's just seemed to be like, I've had other people on the show that have said that exact same thing that are podcasters that do that. Like they want to be an entrepreneur. So they have on entrepreneurs. Like they want to be a real estate investor. So they have on real estate investors to figure out like how to do it. And I think that one of the things that I think is interesting with that is that you mentioned earlier and I would definitely agree with it, that podcasting is not necessarily a lucrative business unless you're like in the upper echelon of millions of downloads somehow per episode. I'm not there. You might be there. I mean, so more power to you if you are.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, I certainly am not.
You know, I gave someone some podcasting advice. You'll appreciate this. They asked me how they become a millionaire by just podcasting. And I gave them some great advice. I'm like, okay, you haven't launched the show yet. Stop trying. Go become a Hollywood A-list actor. Then launch your podcast. Guarantee you'll make $1 million as a podcaster.
Yeah. So. Yeah. My favorite. So are you on Clubhouse?
Yeah. Oh, and I've attended some of your rooms. Yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go. So on Clubhouse, I've had instances, because I do that daily room, where people come in, and I've told this story on the show before, where somebody will come in the room, they'll come up on stage, and this was, early on when I was doing it, and I was getting like 50 downloads an episode, which is solid, for a newer podcaster. And they'd be like, well, I'm getting 10,000 downloads an episode, and I'm really unhappy with the growth. Can you help me? And I'm like, do you want to switch seats with me and you run the conversation? Because I don't know. I don't know anything about that. So those are always the great conversations to have. But so how did you start to build stuff around the podcast that could actually generate revenue for you?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I actually ended up starting. I shouldn't say it's funny. It's funny now. It wasn't then. But I did the same thing I was doing for those previous 3 years of having bad ideas. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm learning a lot from these people. Let me try this. Let me try doing some coaching with it, which the coaching kind of worked. I just knew that it was going to be time for dollars, and that's just didn't want to be in that business. And then I tried doing an online community. I tried all these different things that technically could have worked, but they just didn't. And then finally, I had a guest on. His name was Dane Maxwell. And he talked about how most entrepreneurs, now there's some that are very creative and they can come up with ideas that people just love. And Mike, between you, me, and your audience, guess what? I'm actually not that creative. Like my ideas, people don't really like them that much. So instead of coming up with ideas, he gave me an alternative solution, which was, he said, Alex, find an area that you're passionate about, podcasting. And he said, now talk to the people that are in that space and find the problem that they're having and then offer a solution to that problem. So it's passion, and then you find the people, you find their problem, and then you offer a solution to that problem. And when you can put those things together properly, you can build something. And that was another light bulb moment for me. Like when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I'm going to stop trusting my own ideas. Instead, I'm going to talk to the people in podcasting and find out what on earth are you struggling with? What seems to be the problem for you? And can I help you with a solution? Now, obviously you can't help every single person, but when I talked to at one point 100 different people and all of them said something almost exactly the same, then there's some merit. There was an idea that I could actually run with. And it really wasn't until I did that anything ever had traction. The podcast was doing well. It was growing in a very healthy pace. So I was happy with that. But that was kind of it. Like the monetization side was at zero until I could figure out that, I need to find a problem to offer a solution for from people that I really care about.
Right. And that's one of the things that even me, I mean, like I'm happy with the growth that my show has seen over the last year. But at the same time, like my revenue from this show is zero. Directly related from the show is zero.
Right.
Maybe peripheral from getting insurance deals or whatever from people that I've had on the show or putting content out and getting stuff on the back end. But I think that's always a very interesting concept because people have all these different opinions on how to monetize podcasts and how to do that. And we have a lot of podcasters who listen to the show, so maybe we could talk about it. Like there's a variety of ways. Like I think people just get stuck in that mindset of like, well, I need to get sponsors and it has to be a CPM or a CPR model, and that's it. And like, but that's not it. Like, right. Yeah. That there's plenty more that you could do to help to at least start the process of monetizing your show.
For sure. Yeah. And most people, if you really properly niche down in a podcast, like you're starting one, you found your niche properly, there might not be more than 2,000 people that ever listen to the show. If that's the case and you have a sponsor and advertisement in your show, you're never going to make enough money to even eat just based on that one principle there. And so there's got to be an alternative solution. Like, again, if you have the downloads for it and you want to do those things, like you can do a combination and that can work really well. But for me, especially with people that are just starting out, who is the audience that you serve? So find those people, really niche down, and then what solution can you offer them? So at first, I don't even think you should monetize. Just talk to the people who listen to your podcast. If you can talk to 20 or 30 people who listen, you can learn a lot and then build a product or service off of that. So if everyone's like, oh, it's a dog walking podcast, and some pet owners are really self-conscious because their dog barks at every dog that goes by and they feel really weird about it. And maybe someone makes a PDF about like how to train your dog to stop barking when it sees other dogs. I'm not a pet owner, so what I just said is probably completely ridiculous. But all I'm saying is if you built a solution like that and your listeners said they were already interested in it, now they might be interested in downloading that. And then from there, you can sell them something. Now you have built trust with them. Now they might be interested in saying, oh, they're offering a weekend course. If I go here with my dog, they will actually help do the training. That might be an interesting way to monetize a podcast.
Right. Yeah. So like you said, there's plenty of other things. What are some other pain points that you've seen that you were discussing before, like figuring out ways that you can take a pain point and turn it into something that you could actually provide value back to people?
Yeah. So the big thing that I found, that I referenced when I heard 100 people say the same thing that were in podcasting, I was actually speaking at a conference. It was Podfest in 2020. And Mike, I don't know if you remember this, but back in the day, the good old days, we used to go to conferences, like not in your room and not in front of the computer. You used to physically go. You did this thing called shake hands, high five, hug. Those are all things that cavemen used to do back in the day.
I was big on like this one, then you bring them in, you give them like the back slap.
Me too.
Like the bro hug, I think it's called, with the double back tap.
Whatever it is, I freaking love that. So anyway,
I do remember that. Yeah, for sure. That was fun.
I pray that we're coming back to it. But anyway, that's another conversation. Well, this is not a political podcast, everybody. But so I was getting on stage, about 2,000 people there. I told my wife, I'm like, when I get off, I'm going to ask these podcasters what they're struggling with. And so I got off stage, and it doesn't matter if you speak really well or if you don't. Like, regardless, people are going to line up to talk to you because that's just what people do. They're all very nice. And so I actually ended up talking to a lot of people, and 100 of them said the same thing, which is, Alex, I'm having a really hard time finding the ideal guest for my show. I can find people that will be on it, but I can't find the right people. Like, I can get my mom or my cousin, but like the right person's been hard for me to find. And that was in the moment that I realized, you know what, this is right after I talked to Dane Maxwell, as I just kind of gave him credit. I went home with that and I said, okay, what can I do in this space? How can I somehow serve these people? And that's when the idea for my business that I now run, my software as a service, my SaaS startup called Podmatch. And basically what we came up with is, could we make an online dating style app, but instead of connecting people for dates, we connect podcast guests and hosts for interviews based off all these different criteria points that they have. And that was a solution that we set out to solve. And that's how I've been able to monetize my podcast, if you will. And guess what? I don't even have an advertisement on it. It just comes up organically in my show almost every episode. Right. And that's done better for me than anything else I've ever done.
Yeah. So let's talk about Podmatch. So it's, like you said, it's a guest to host matching site. So what makes it different? Because there are others that exist in the internet, on the web. So why is Podmatch different than the other ones?
Yeah, funny thing here. When I launched Podmatch and had the idea for it, nobody had launched yet. Apparently, we all got the same idea at the same time, which I think is really funny. Because I was like, this is so original. And then we launched, I'm like, dang, 3 other people launched in the same week. Like, what is this mess, you know? So, but hey, that means we all have a good idea, right? And at the end of the day, some people look at that as like, oh, that sounds competitive, but there's millions of podcasts. So any of us would be very foolish to think that we could support the entire industry ourselves. So actually, I consider us all co-educators. We're helping people understand these services exist. So what we're different is we actually do true matching. No, the rest of them are more of directories. I'm not talking bad about them. They're great for what they are, but we actually have a matching algorithm based on 40 different pieces of criteria. So everything from availability, from language, to topic, to what you talk about in your bio, to anything else. I mean, there's so many things. I can't even get into all of them. The idea is, hey, let's make sure that the match is as close as we can get it to ideal. And from there, people can message each other in the platform. The idea was just, hey, let's offer the solution to the problem we heard. And that's the one we were hearing.
Right. So how does the process work? So I actually have it open like right here on my other monitor. So you sign up, you're either a podcast guest, you're a podcast host, or you could be both. Mm-hmm. And then is it a paid service? Is it a free service? Do you provide any like instructions on how to like best set you up to get on the right shows?
Yeah, so the setup process is quite a bit because everyone on both sides, you're creating a profile for your podcast or a one sheet for your guesting profile. So both those things can be, there's quite a bit of information that you have to fill in for us to actually do the matching. And it's like anything else, you get out of it what you put into it. So if somebody's just like, I'll fill this out later, and they type that in, the system's gonna have a hard time matching you with somebody because it doesn't really know what that means, right? So, but when you're done with it, it has a public-facing profile for both people. So you can actually use it like for lead gen, bring people to your Podmatch account. But Podmatch has a free base and there's a paid option. But the way we put it is that about 90% of people are great with the free version and it works for them. Now, if you just launched a book or if you have like a daily podcast, then you're going to want to go with the paid membership because you're going to want a lot more people on your show, or you're going to want to be on a lot more shows, at least temporarily. So those are kind of our two tiers. And the whole idea goes back to like, we wanted to offer something for free because we wanted to be able to really serve people that were in podcasting or people that wanted to get their voice out and heard by the world.
Right. So was this also something that you had to contend with when you were doing your show and trying to find guests and get them on your show? Was it a pain point for you as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, especially before you launch, because you have to get guests before you launch.
Right.
And convincing somebody that I was going to start a podcast wasn't really an easy thing to do. Now, and once I launched, I found those people that give me a shot, but then it was just right back to it. Like, it was difficult because I launched and I did 13 episodes before I launched. So I had 13 weeks to find people to agree to be guests. And that was, I mean, you remember those days. That was not easy.
Well, I'll tell you this. I did not launch with 13. I launched with 1. I had literally no plan. I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. And then I had never listened to podcasts. I didn't really do a ton of research. I asked a friend of mine who's like a singer for a screamo punk band if this mic that I bought was good. And he was like, yeah, it should be fine. I was like, all right, great. We'll pick that one. So it was like, that's how I started. And then I went a few weeks doing an episode a week, and every now and then would add in a second episode. And then eventually I was like, I need to start getting ahead of this, because I had one where I had a panel episode, because I started out a lot of panel shows. I had a panel set up to record on a Thursday with the episode posting the following Tuesday. Somebody canceled from the panel, and then everybody else dropped out. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't have an episode to post for this coming Tuesday, which is like, everyone tells you is like the cardinal sin of a podcaster. Like, if you miss a week, you might as well just close up shop. You're
You're done, bro. Forget it.
Yeah, you're done. So I called a buddy of mine who's like a networking guy. He's, in the business world. I was like, we need to think of an episode. Like, you need to come on Monday. We need to record something because I need something to post on Tuesday. So we did the sales process before and after COVID, which actually did pretty well listenership wise, but I had to like edit it that night, Monday night, because I'm head chef and chief bottle washer here at the Morning Spotlight as well. So I do my editing, my marketing, the whole thing, and got it posted, the next day at 3 a.m. because that's usually when my episodes go live. And I was like, never again. I'm never getting that deep and like that close to a posting date ever. So now I'm, a month or two out, which is just so freeing, and I feel
after
so
that,
relaxed.
I mean, you were hours
not a good experience.
Hours away.
It was like under the gun. I'm like, oh shit.
So like 1 month feels like years. Like, just don't get too comfortable, man. Like, I could see like on a beach for like a month, and you're like, oh shoot. Don't call me if you hit that point again. All right.
Yeah, so that was one of the things. At one point, I was a month out, but now I'm doing 2 episodes a week. So you don't realize how quickly you blow through that pipeline doing 2 episodes a week. So I'm looking at it. I'm like, I'm good for the next month. Then I got 3 weeks in. I was like, oh boy, I have 1 more week left, and I have nothing in the pipeline again. So so that's just me. I would not recommend my style to many people, unless you're like me and you're just all over the place, then fine. But how I started, how I operate, the whole thing is not necessarily like on the up and up on how you're supposed to do things.
You're doing a good job, man. You had me convinced. This is a great show. But now you're scaring me a little bit, because this week I moved to 2 episodes a week. So now I'm a little bit nervous, and that's probably not great for me to be on a show talking to people and being nervous, but here we are.
Well, but you know what it is? It's like, because you do 2 shows now, and I know one is monthly and then the other one is weekly, but you're doing 2 episodes now. I look at it as having 2 shows. So I have my Tuesday shows, which are my real estate shows. And then I have my Thursday shows like this one that are different. Like, they're just other podcasters. Okay. They're, other types of people that I just find cool. So when I schedule them, I basically have 2 columns on a spreadsheet with all the stuff that I have to do for each one, with like check boxes and everything. And I just go down and I make sure that I'm ahead on each column. So like, as long as those are working out in advance, it's all under the same show and the same heading and everything. But I just try to operate it as 2 different shows. And then just make sure that we're, it's not like, hey, I'm just going to bag a couple guests. Then I realize I have 15 real estate episodes and 2 non-real estate episodes. Then you're screwed. You got to get back on track. So,
right. That's smart, man. I like that. I actually took a lot from that. Thank you. That's cool.
Of course. Well, I mean, I don't know if maybe you're doing something similar, different. I don't know.
They have 2 different focuses. So what you just spoke is perfect. That's very helpful.
There you go. I like to provide value here on the Morning Spotlight. Man. So talk to me. I mean, entrepreneurs, I feel like, and there's always a lot of entrepreneurs here at this PodMax event. They're always looking for, new things. Like entrepreneurs are always kind of like thinking outside the box, trying to figure out what else they can get their hands on, what other kinds of things they could start. Are you similar in that way? Are you trying to figure out some new ways to try to get out in front? Are there any things that you would like to talk about that maybe you're getting yourself involved in right now?
Yeah, I mean, first off, to speak to that, like we've got to learn to hone that in a little bit because like actually I have a specific journal every day, every morning. I write down an idea because I always have like ideas in my head. And here's the thing, I won't touch 90% of them ever, but occasionally one hits that might be worth looking into. And it's a fun exercise, but we have to be careful at the same time, right? Like Podmatch is my main thing right now, and it's still early phase. Actually, we're 4 days away from our 1-year anniversary. And I need to be careful and respect that and respect the members that are using it. So I can't just jump into all these different things. Now, with that said, of course, if something strategically makes sense, I'm going to look at it. So right now, actually, I asked the Podmatch members, because that's my tribe now, and there's about, actually today we broke 12,000 people using the platform, which I'm very excited about.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm asking them like, hey, what else is a pain point? What else are you struggling with? And I actually heard a lot of people, it's actually something you just mentioned, having like your checklist of the things you do for every episode, right? A lot of people struggle with how to keep that organized, where to begin. I used to send out an Excel template that I had because I was using that for a long time, but it's not responsive. There's not a lot you can, Excel has its limits unless you really know how to use Excel. And so I'd sent out to so many people. I was like, oh, I wonder if people would appreciate something like this. So I actually launched, it's in alpha right now. So I've got 50 people testing it for us, but it's called Podcast SOP. The SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedures. It's a glorified, pretty checklist that's online that you set up yourself and allows you to check off each step of the podcast. It's very similar to like a project management system, like a Monday.com or Asana, where you can kind of have like due dates, who's responsible for it, links in it, and stuff like that. But it's all under one focus, which is releasing your podcast episodes. And so that's kind of like a new project. It was just a random idea I had one day because I was like, oh, people are struggling with this. Maybe we could try it. And here's the thing, it's in alpha. So I got 50 people testing it. They could all tell me this is stupid. I would never use it. I would never pay for it. Right. And if that's the case, then I won't do anything with it. But it's an idea that I'm exploring and moving on with.
Right. Yeah. So I think I think it's a good idea because that's one of the things that I did not have at the beginning. Right. Or didn't do because I was just like, hey, I'm going to do an episode. And then it'd be like the night before, which I still do sometimes. And I'm like creating like the marketing videos and the Canva post and whatever else that I'm going to do for that particular episode and writing the show notes, which I'm always like the worst. I'm the worst with writing show notes, just as a heads up. I'm sorry.
I'm not great at it either. Yeah. So I'm actually happy to hear that.
Right. It's like the one thing that I know I need to do better, but I just like can't get out of my own way with it sometimes. But I'll do my best. I promise.
We started a podcast because we want to talk, not because we want to write.
Yeah, right. I mean, I like doing the videos. I'll send you some nice videos at the end of this. But
sweet.
Yeah. You mentioned writing stuff down in a journal. So as an entrepreneur, and even with me as a sales rep and not really confined to an office or I can kind of do whatever I want, that's a blessing and also a challenge, at least in my opinion. I'm interested to see your take on it because it's sometimes hard to hold yourself accountable. So do you have routines that you kind of keep yourself on? Like, you mentioned the journal. Do you journal? Do you do stuff like that?
Mike, this is such an insightful question. I think it's such an important point that many people just want to skip because we want to talk about the air quotes here, sexiness of entrepreneurship, right? I'll wake up whenever I want. I'll work whenever I feel like it. Like I'll stay up all night if I want to. And many of us, we both like that, right? Like, that sounds sweet, man. Yeah. But at the same time, there has to be some self-discipline included now. If you worked a corporate job like I did, my accountability to wake up every day was not getting fired, right? Like eventually, like I had a good reputation there. But if I just was like, oh, it's 11 p.m. or a.m., better get to work, people would be like, what the heck is wrong with you, man? Like that conversation would have happened. That built-in accountability is like, I got to get to work so I don't get fired. Like that's just subconscious level. Immediately when people shift to self-employed, I find the same thing happen. They're like, oh, I have so much trouble waking up now. Like I can't get myself to start work before 11. It's like, oh my gosh, like, are you working late? No, I end really early too because my friends want to hang out. Like I hear this conversation a lot. And for me, when I first shifted, I was like, I'm not going to struggle with that. No, I did. Like my first few weeks that I was actually getting out of the 9-to-5 job, I realized I was sleeping in a lot more. It's because I turned off my alarm. It makes sense, right? But I wanted freedom is what we all say. But the truth is I left because I wanted to start a business and serve a certain group of people. So I let them hold me accountable. I had to remember that, like, no, somebody needs me to show up today. And that's when I started taking more seriously. I set an alarm again. And I started actually writing things down in a journal. And now I keep a daily journal. So yeah, I have my idea journal is what I call it. But then I have like a daily journal where every day I'm reviewing my mission, my purpose, looking at those things, seeing what I'm doing, why I'm doing them, and then writing down the things I need to do that day to get closer to achieving those things or to better serve people. And by reviewing this every morning and every evening, I'm writing every morning, every night, looking at this. It's just maybe altogether, maybe a 20-minute practice a day when you combine it all. But by doing that, it's been able to help me stay motivated and self-disciplined to continue showing up every day to serve the people that I have devoted to show up and serve.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a great point because you are accountable, whether you like it or not. I mean, it's easy to think that you're not, but you are. But the other thing too that I probably should have asked this at the beginning, but I don't know why. But I think it all ties in to like what we're talking about right now is that I think also whether you're working a corporate job or an entrepreneurship job, I think that even though you have more freedom as an entrepreneur or a sales rep or whatever you want to call it, I think you do have. While you have more freedom and more time, your time is also like sporadic. I think like when you actually do work, because, you know, if you go to a 9-to-5 job, that's when you work. And then beyond that, you know, after 5 o'clock, before 9 o'clock and on the weekends, you can do whatever you want. You know, you're not beholden to go to that office and do work all the time. So what are ways that you make sure that, you know, I've heard this before, like your cup is full? You know, like how do you, you know, make sure that even though you are accountable and you are working hard to make sure that these things are staying profitable and afloat and everything like that. But what are some things that you like to do?
Yeah, I mean, another great question because it's so important that we actually take time to fill ourselves up. When I stopped to evaluate what you're talking about here, I realized I was working 70 hours a week. That's way too much. And the reason I know that is actually still till this day, now I clock in and out. And that's not accountability to my team. There's 7 of us in this company now. It's not accountability to any of them. The only person who sees it is me because I need to make sure that I'm getting my hours to a more realistic standpoint. So now I'm working closer to 50. My goal by January 2022 is to be at 35. And I did the math. If I just cut out 10 minutes a day, that's 50 minutes a week, then I can eventually get down to where I want to be. And I'm just going to do that. But yeah, it's so important that we not only track that to make sure, okay, I first off, there might be people that are the opposite, like, oh, I'm only working 20 hours a week. That's a problem. But it's also a problem to be working 70. That's insane.
Yeah. But balance. Life's all about balance.
Exactly.
Anything. Yeah.
And what I was missing is what you're talking about was like really filling yourself back up, getting your cup full again. For me, what are the things that make me feel alive? I love spending time with my friends. I love spending time with my wife. I live very close to the ocean here in Jacksonville, Florida. Like going to the beach and playing games and sports out there is like my favorite thing to do. So I make sure that every day I'm working out because I love it. I'm going to the beach at least once a week. I'm spending time with friends. I'm going on dates with my wife. Like actually doing those things and putting them in my schedule. Because I think the biggest problem we have is we assume we like those things. They'll just kind of happen. That is not true. When you get into entrepreneurship and you start seeing some success, you will devote so much time and so much energy to it. You have to keep the main thing, this including filling yourself up. So you have to be intentional with that and make sure that you're really focused on it. So for me, I've just had to write those things down. And some days, like I write down 3 important things to do every day. Sometimes one of those 3 things is to take my wife on a date. And the other 2 might be do a great interview with Mike, right? Like these things might come up on my list of things, but I have to make sure that I prioritize them. Just like I'm prioritizing the times I do work, I'm prioritizing the times I don't work.
Right. And it's got to be hard too, like starting something because because I'm sure when you started podmatch.com, you did not, I mean, I'm assuming this could be totally wrong. You did not have a team of 7 when you first put this together.
No.
Right. It was Alex, probably, right?
It was, and so I have a business partner, 50-50.
Okay.
He's the developer, but I do everything else.
Right.
And day one, I'm like, okay, what do I do first? You know, like writing down the 3 most important things to do. I'm like, I don't even know what to do, period.
Right.
And so the first thing, like just to help people get started, write down, figure out what to do. That's the first thing that I needed to do. I need to figure out, okay, what the heck is my first step? Okay, I should probably incorporate this business. I should probably draft up 50-50 partnership. I should probably make a separate bank account, right? You'll start figuring things out, but it's just a matter of getting your feet to the ground. But yeah, at first, you're doing all of it. It's tough to balance, but you have to find a way. Like your company might grow a little bit slower because you're not working 100 hours a week, but also it's not going to crash and burn because you just can't be involved anymore. You have to have that balance in there.
Yeah. When we're talking about, I just had a good question. I think it just escaped me. No, damn it. We were doing so good too. I knew this was going to happen at some point. I was going to ask something about like, it was definitely about entrepreneurship, but whatever. Oh God, I'm so frustrated with myself now. It was going to be really good. I promise. Oh, let's do goals and then maybe it'll come back to me. So what are some goals that you have for, we'll do Podmatch. What are some goals that you have for that? Let's just look at the next year and kind of see what we're doing moving forward for that.
Yeah, the big goal right now for it, and again, we actually listen to our members for everything. So they tell us what they want. They design the roadmap. We're very focused on making sure that we continue to solve the problems for the people that we care about. So we ask them what we should do, what they think would be great for us to implement next. And so right now, what we're really focused on is we have 3 small things left that people are asking for, which I'm so thankful for, because at first we must add 100 things. People are like, this would be cool. Now we're down to 3, and we should have those finished pretty soon here. And then the next step is to implement a big UX upgrade, because we launched this thing MVP, minimum viable product. I mean, it was bare bones, no logo, no nothing when we launched. It's slightly better than that now, but it's about to be really amazing because we've already started that project. So the UX upgrade is going to be really big. So we believe after that we'll be at a mature product. And then from there, it's just a matter of, can we continue to grow and develop? So I mentioned earlier, we just broke 12,000 members. The goal by the end of the year is to be at 25,000. And really, again, just to serve those people. And that's going to be our kind of our big focuses for the rest of this year.
Gotcha. No, I think those are great goals. And I remembered my question. So you talked about how you had people on the show that were, you were learning from them about this entrepreneurship journey. Did you also seek out, I mean, I know you mentioned a couple names prior that you've had on as guests, like seek out mentors? And is it hard to find mentors that could be in a space that maybe is like a new thing? Like if Podmatch is a new thing that doesn't actually exist, prior to it, all 3 of you doing it all at the same time. Is that something that you did?
Yeah. And at first I think I had the wrong mentality here, because I was like, okay, maybe I need to find like a mentor that built a dating app, because it's kind of similar to that, right? Like maybe I need that. Or maybe I need to find like a really successful SaaS founder, software as a service founder. And the truth is, I just needed to find somebody that could help me keep my priorities straight and help challenge me to think differently. And when I kind of shifted that perspective of who could be my mentor, it opened up a little bit. Now you want somebody who understands the space, right? Like I don't want a guy who still doesn't know the internet exists. Like that might not have been a good idea.
Right. Not a good call.
Somebody who really understands at least how the business runs, how a digital business or software as a service will run was good. So, and the other thing is, at first I was like, oh, I should find somebody in person. It's just not realistic. And this past year's proven that it's not even required. So I just found some people that didn't even know they were my mentor. Like a perfect example is Michael Hyatt, somebody who I just learned a lot from watching from afar. I've only had a couple conversations with him ever, but the rest of it's me consuming his content and learning and finding the things that can really help out. Now, I do think that if you can find a mentor you can talk to, great. Then find somebody that you can meet with. And it's got to have like obviously a mutual beneficial relationship. If you're not paying the person, like you have to be able to help them as well. But for me, I've done a really great job of just learning from people from afar and occasionally having conversations when I just really get stuck. But I owe that to my network as well. Like the people that are closest to me, they really help me a lot. I have a lot of great friends in my corner that I can really rely on. I tell them my goals for the week and we just kind of hold each other accountable. And that's a very helpful thing as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's important. I mean, like I have mentors, whether they're title side or podcasting side. And then I do have people that don't even know that they're my mentors, but they are. And they don't even have to be people that are super experienced or whatever. They were just people that we talk to every time, you know what I mean? Or like we talk to sometimes and they've, given me tips or that they don't even know our tips. And I just use them to help level up the show. So this always happens to me at Podmatch. Like I always get like the stuff at the top, like the little notifications, like 2 minutes left or like overtime. And I don't even care. I just do whatever I want. But
that's right. Straight up, man. I love it.
So, all right. So we're going to move the show into our closing segment though, which is called Under the Spotlight. So the Spotlighters have been listening to Mike Hamm and Alex Sanfilippo talk for probably 45 minutes about a lot of stuff, entrepreneurship, podcasting, all the things that you have going on. What is one thing that you would want the Spotlighters to walk away from this episode with, so you are under the spotlight?
Yeah, it's a quote that I'll actually mention by Stephen Covey, which is to keep the main thing, right? The main thing is to keep the main thing is the way that he said it. And I might have the wrong quote of who said that, but regardless, I think it's such an important thing to remember. Like now I'm blank on who actually said that.
No fact checking on this
cool,
show.
Good. Someone's gonna be like, that was the wrong person. Regardless, the quote is the main thing.
Great quote. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so I wanted to say that because so many of us as entrepreneurs, we think about the wrong thing. We think about having a more free lifestyle where we can sleep in more, stay up later, right? Or how we can kind of get our hands into a bunch of different things and try all these different things. But really, to succeed, you have to just focus on what the main thing is. Like, what is the thing that you're doing? What is the problem that you're solving for somebody? Hone in on that and make sure that at least not 80 or 90% of your focus is on that. And then the rest can be on whatever it is, right? Like leave some room for creativity and stuff like that, of course. But if you can learn to do that and hone in and really build your craft around that, I can promise it's going to serve you extremely well.
I love that. Great under the spotlight. So let's hit him with the link. So if people need more Alex, where can they go to get more Alex?
Yeah, so you mentioned podmatch.com. My podcast called Creating a Brand is at creatingabrand.com. And actually, a really specific episode that I think might be a good follow-up to after listening to me and Mike talk would be an episode I did with Greg McEwen, where he talked about the disciplined pursuit of less. And that's at creatingabrand.com/087. creatingabrand.com/087. I think it'd be a great follow-up to this episode. But man, really, your audience needs to hang with you. I love the show, the format. You're a lot of fun to talk to and really just ask some great questions along the way.
Well, I appreciate that. And for the Spotlighters, as always, I will put my website, themorningspotlight.com, and the email address, themorningspotlight@gmail.com, in the show notes as well, as well as all of Alex's links. That was tough to say. And in case you want to go through me to get to him or vice versa, whatever. So Spotlighters, I appreciate you listening. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. This was amazing.
Mike, it was an honor to be here. Thanks so much, everybody.
Of course. And everybody else, we will catch you next time.